Welcome to the first webinar, the first Pavement ME Design webinar in fiscal year 2023. Our topic today is data management in PMED version 3.0, tenants, libraries, and workspaces. Next slide, please. I'm Clark Morrison, State Pavement Design Engineer at the North Carolina Department of Transportation and Chair of the Ash-to-Ware Pavement ME Design Task Force. Hari Nair of Virginia DOT is the Vice Chair of the task force and will provide moderating backup if needed. Our presenter today is Chadwick Becker, Co-Project Manager at ARA. And I will note the presentation is being recorded and will be available for viewing on the ME Design Resource website at www.me-design.com. Next slide, please. The Pavement ME Task Force provides guidance and oversight for the maintenance, support, and enhancement of the PMED software. Members of the task force are Ryan Fragapane, who is our Ash-to-Ware project manager, myself, Hari Nair with Virginia DOT, Patrick Birrell with Ohio DOT, Kumar Dave with Indiana DOT, Felix Doucette with the Quebec Ministry of Transportation, Dulce Feldman with the California DOT, Ian Risch with Georgia DOT, and our liaison to the Transportation Association of Canada is Suzanne Chan with the Ontario Ministry of Transportation. Our FHWA liaison is Tom Yu. The task force both represents state DOTs to Ash-to-Ware and represents Ash-to-Ware to the state DOTs. So any of these people would be good contacts or resources for issues related to the PMED software. Next slide, please. I'll go over a few rules of the road for the webinar. Number one, your phones are being and microphones are being muted. So please post your questions in the Q&A box. This can be accessed by clicking on the WebEx Q&A button. The presenters will answer all questions at the end of the webinar as time permits. Questions not answered because of time will be responded to separately. Next slide. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Chad for the remainder of the webinar.
Thanks very much, Clark. Just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, I assume everyone can hear me okay. So yeah, a couple of housekeeping items. If you're having an issue with the webinar, you can send a message in chat to Heidi, and she should be able to help you out. If you do have questions, don't post them in the chat. Post them in the Q&A box. They're easier to keep track of there, and that'll help us make sure we get everybody's questions answered at the end of the webinar. And if you're having trouble seeing the presentation full screen, you can click on the WebEx drop-down button, go to the View menu, and select Fit in Viewer, and that should fit everything into your screen. Okay, we're going to lead off with a couple of poll questions. So I'm going to open up the poll now. It should be open for 1 minute. And please answer those questions, and then we'll get going. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so before we dive into the meat of the webinar, just a couple of introductory statements. Some of this will be review from the last webinar, but we want to make sure everybody understands these points. So we've got the Pavement ME Design production site up at https://pavementmedesign.com. The Pavement ME Design web services are located on the multi-tenant web server. Single tenant and on-premise deployments for the system are also available, and you can reach out to Pavement ME Design at ARA.com for information on or if you have questions on any of those items. Wanted to make a quick note on wind speed in Mera. This came up as we were getting ready to release version 3. The Mera 2, and this is specific to SI units in the system. So the Mera 2 wind speed in the Pavement ME Design API for SI units now provides values in kilometers per hour. And previously, they were being provided in meters per second. And agencies affected by this were having to edit the HCD files to do a conversion from meters per second to kilometers per hour. So if you were pulling the data, the climate data directly from the API, that is through the app, that you no longer need to do that conversion. They are now updated to kilometers per hour. Of note, if you are pulling the HCD files from InfoPave directly through the InfoPave site and not through Pavement ME Design, those wind speed values are still in meters per second. Now, I know that InfoPave is correcting this to kilometers per hour, and they're likely to be finished with that by the end of August. So check your HCD files, make sure your wind speed values are in the correct unit type if you're working with SI units. Pavement ME Design expects these wind speeds to be in kilometers per hour and does not perform any conversions in the app. Okay. Pavement ME Design subscription services. The desktop application is estimated to be sunset over a period of 5 years, starting this past July. Again, the web services are hosted on the multi-tenant web server, and again, the single and on-premise deployments are also available. And we'll go into some detail on that in future webinars. So really quick, I just wanted to show off the new Mera climatic data set before we get going on the rest of the webinar. So I'm just going to make a real quick design here to show users how that works. So once you've selected a design, or even technically before that, you can go into climate, and you can see there's a new selection here. There's the Mera 2 climate data set via LTPP InfoPave. So if we select that, and then we select a location on the map, so we'll just pick over here in Springfield, Missouri. So right now what it's doing is we're going through the Azure Data Integration Framework. That's communicating with the InfoPave server, and it's retrieving some climatic data information for us. And when this comes back, it should come back with 9 markers. And those 9 markers represent the climatic data points that we got from LTPP. So unless I'm having a connection issue, this should be going through. There they are. So these are the climatic data points from LTPP, and this looks very familiar to what we've seen previously in the application. But the nice thing now is you can select one or more of these markers and then hit Retrieve Climate Data, and it's going to go back out to the InfoPave site. It's going to get the HCD files, unpack them, and load them directly into your design. So no more having to monkey with files and move them around and unblock them and that kind of stuff. So you can see we've picked up this Mera climatic data point. So I wanted to show you, and you can still use your, if you have customized climatic data, you can still create data sets from a local folder on your machine. That's still available. But I wanted to show everybody that the Mera 2 climatic data set's now fully integrated with the system. So just a quick brief note on that. Okay. Just a couple of subscription clarifications for purchasing and access and subscription versus desktop. So your subscription purchase gives you access to both the web application and the desktop application. That's version 3 and version 2.6.2. And a couple of the differences in version 3, we've improved the runtime of APADs significantly, so that runs a lot faster. The 151 integration is only available in version 3. And version 3 includes the rigid recalibration, and version 2.6.2 does not. So just a couple of differences between version 3 and version 2.6.2. There are no prerequisites for this webinar. Okay, so the last webinar we went through an introduction to PMED Design version 3, and really the focus was on the design editor. So going in, manipulating your design, how to create a structure, how to access the climate data, how to run the design, and how to get your results. So if you missed that webinar, I encourage you to head over to the website, me-design.com. You can download that webinar and watch it there. It has a lot of good information on basic usage of the application and how to create and work with your designs. So in part 2, the focus is going to shift to data management in the web application, and that's going to revolve around these concepts of tenants, libraries, and workspaces. So our objectives for the webinar today are to be able to define tenants, libraries, and workspaces in the app, understand how they are associated with each other and how they're used in the application, and then go into some details on each one of them, like how to access and manage your tenant, how to manage users inside of your tenant, being able to work with the permissions and policies and assigning those to your users and groups, and then how to create and manage your library data, including material libraries, as well as full design templates. And so we'll be looking at those things. We're going to look at how libraries are associated with workspaces, how to manage users and libraries in a workspace, and how to customize a workspace user interface, which is a brand new feature in the system. And then we'll also look at how to select that workspace for a given user session, and then if you're going to be using that workspace for a while, how you can set it as the system default, or as the default for your user account. So this is a webinar outline. I just want to go over sort of the flow of the webinar today. So we're going to look at tenant management first, then workspace management, then library management, and then user management policies, agency subscriptions, and then we'll have a review of the main points on those items, and then we'll go through the Q&A. So for each section here, like for tenant management, for workspace management, so on, I'm going to show some of the slides for that section, discuss them a little bit, and then I'm going to switch over to the actual user interface and walk through some of the actions in the UI so that everybody can see exactly how each one of these concepts works in the system. Okay, so jumping right into it, tenants, libraries, workspaces, and users. So first thing that's important is to just understand what these concepts are. So a tenant is a group of users who share common access with specific privileges to the software instance. That's what defines a tenant. And usually this is a one-to-one relationship with an agency. So an agency will typically have a single tenant with some exceptions. Libraries define the data that you want to reuse in the tenant. So your tenant has access to one or more libraries, and those libraries define all of the data for your tenant. And then workspaces are the data and the user interface configuration that are defined for a specific use case in your tenant. So if you have, you might have a workspace that's set up for a particular agency. If you're a consultant or a set of agencies, you might have a workspace for each one of those. And those workspaces are going to define the user interface configuration that you see, as well as the libraries that you have access to when you're in that workspace. And really, these three things, tenants, libraries, and workspaces, work together to help you organize the information that your agency is managing. And of course, we can't forget about the users. That defines who gets to use your tenant, and we'll take a look at how to manage that later on in the webinar. Okay, so tenant management. Customers and agencies can have multiple tenants. It's uncommon, but it is possible. The tenant that you utilize is going to govern the workspaces and the libraries that you'll have access to as a user. So for an example, a customer might have a tenant in the multi-tenant cloud, and they might have another in a single tenant hosted service that they use for other purposes. And a customer may also have a user that belongs to a consulting agency tenant and to a DOT tenant. That's also totally allowed in the system. So users can select their tenant in the user management component, and they're able to set default tenants for future use. And so we'll take a look at that feature in a little bit. So tenant features. Tenants have workspaces, libraries, and users. And your tenant allows you to access and manage one or more workspaces, allows you to manage those components. And a common question is, what does the tenant look like? So when you're accessing your tenant, you're going to see the workspaces, the users, the libraries that it manages. And generally, the tenant can be thought of as just a group of users who share a common purpose or goal, and the data and system structures that support their work. And very loosely, and in most cases, each agency just has one tenant. Some larger firms with distinct business units that may not communicate with each other, they might have multiple tenants. Or agencies that have different types of subscriptions may have multiple tenants. And basically, the system is just set up to be very flexible. So as agencies have these different needs, we're able to utilize the tenants and the subscriptions to maintain that flexibility for those agencies. So as we go through the different components, you may see some overlap, and this is due to the flexible nature of the system design and exists to provide options for the various user needs. Okay, so let's take a little break from the presentation and actually look at what tenant is. So this is sort of the home page here for PMED design, which we're going to be updating over the next few months. This is the designs page, and this is where we spent quite a bit of time inside the design editor component in part 1. And so where we're going to look now is under tenants. If you log in and you can't see the tenants node in the navigation menu, that's a policy setting for your tenant, and that just means that you don't have permissions to do that. And we'll look later on how your root admin can assign you the appropriate policies so that you can get in and manage tenant data. So I've set up a test tenant here called PMED test tenant. And these tenants are actually assigned to your agency automatically. And so if you have more than one tenant, it will show up here. And this is how you'd be able to jump in and manage multiple tenants. So I will go to the PMED test tenant. And we can see we go right to the workspaces page, which we're just about to discuss. There's your default libraries, design templates, users, group policies, subscription information, and tenant information. And so this is basically the tenant view. And for 99% of our agencies, you're going to see just this one tenant. Right, back to the presentation. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to look at inside of the tenant is workspaces. Workspaces are the data and the user interface configuration defined for a specific use case in the tenant, and they're a powerful tool for managing design data in PMED design. So why would you create them? Well, workspaces help you manage your libraries, your data, the UI configuration that's specific to your agency. We've had lots of requests even for the desktop application for agencies to be able to reorganize the views, the visibility of properties, the order in which properties appear. And so we wanted to create a configurable user interface that allowed agencies to set up, that allowed agencies to mirror their workflow, what they wanted their designers to be able to do in the system effectively. And that's what the user interface configuration allows you to do. Some workspace examples include setting up a workspace for a specific consultant to manage the data or libraries that they have access to, or as a consultant, you might set up DOT workspaces to store DOT-specific calibration factor libraries or material data that are specific to that DOT. So after selecting your tenant, you're going to be defaulted to this workspaces component. I just want to note in the screenshot here, there is a workspace called the system workspace, and that one is not editable, and that's on purpose. The system workspace contains the out-of-the-box defaults for Pavement ME Design. If you're a user in Pavement ME Design, you always have access to the system workspace, and that's like the global calibration factors and the default user interface components. And so we wanted to make sure that there was always a way for users to get back to the system defaults, and that's what the system workspace is. So a little bit more about workspaces. Creating a workspace is very simple. You'll just click on an Add New button in the Workspaces component. You'll give the workspace a name, and you're ready to go. Workspaces can be set as the default workspace for the currently logged in user, and it can be set as the active workspace by default, and you can see that in the screenshot here. We also see the number of users associated with a given workspace in this component, and the default unit type that's being used by the workspace. After initially being created, a workspace does not have any assigned users. It'll say 0, as you can see in Sandbox 2 here. So your users won't be able to use that workspace until you've associated them with the workspace, and we're going to go over how to do that here in just a minute. And just note that you can also copy workspaces here and delete them. The copy functionality is, I believe, fully implemented on production. It should copy all of your user associations and all of your library associations as well. So we're going to look at default settings in both in workspaces in just a minute. But before we do, we actually need to create some libraries, or at least look at the library creation process, because workspaces are supposed to manage that library data for you. So we need to actually get into that before we can take a more meaningful look at how workspaces manage that data. However, there is one thing we can look at, and that's workspace user interface configuration. And so we will take a look at that next. So the Sandbox 1 workspace component, the workspace component, this allows you to manage those library associations, manage what users have access to the workspace, and to edit the UI configuration. So let me jump over to that now, and then we'll review it here in the slides. All right, so again, we're in tenants. It went straight to the workspace page by default. This is the Add New button. You just give a workspace a name, hit the Create button, and it'll show up in the list of workspaces down here. You can set the default workspace by clicking Set as Default. You can also make the workspace active by default, and that means that when you sign in, that's going to be the workspace that your account is going to use by default. This is the unit system switch we looked at, so this switches any units in the that are being utilized in the workspace to, or by default, designs created in the workspace will be created with this unit type, and then the copy and delete features. And this pin here just lets you edit the name of the workspace. So let's jump into Sandbox 1. We can see we have some buttons up here at the top, so we'll go through those. This jumps back to the workspaces page. You can also, I think, click back to the workspaces page over here in the action menu. This is edit the user interface configuration. We're going to take a look at that in just a sec. You can edit users associated with the workspace by clicking the Edit Users button, and you can also edit the libraries that are associated with the workspace. And that'll just switch your view down here where you're seeing. So right now you can see my account is currently paired with the workspace. And I've gone through and created some libraries. Those are also paired with the workspace. And so you can add those associations directly here. Okay, so editing the user interface configuration. Let's click on that guy. So as a designer at the agency, I might say I don't want any of my designers looking at calibration factors because I've set all those. There's a default library for them in the workspace, and we don't do maintenance strategies, so we don't need to see that as well. And so we can just turn those things off. We can also go in and look at something like the structure. And we can come in and we can go to, let's say we go to mechanical properties. And I've actually already changed this. I've moved indirect tensile strength. There's a little UI bug here with creep compliance. We're working on fixing that. But you can see, you just drag and drop these items. So I'm just clicking and dragging and moving the item to wherever I would like to see it in the UI. You can also change whether or not something is even visible in the UI. You can turn it off, and you can make it read-only. If you don't want folks changing particular values or properties in the system, you can mark them as read-only. And any user that's using that workspace, they won't be able to alter those values. So I've turned off a couple of the items here with maintenance strategy and calibration, and I've reordered some of these properties just to give you an idea of what you can do. And you can turn these off at various levels. There's the navigation level, which turns off a whole part of the app. You can change the visibility of the entire pills using these checkboxes here. You can make everything on the pill read-only, or you can go through and work with the individual properties and complex properties and set their visibility in read-only settings. So let me save that. And just to show you what this looks like, we're going to go to selected workspace and make sure that I'm in sandbox 1. I am. And it's set to my default workspace, and it's also my current session workspace. So if I want to change what workspace I'm working in, you can actually change it here in the selected workspace on the nav menu. You just select the one that you'd like to be working in, and then you set it to your current session workspace. If you set it to your default, the next time you log in, it's going to log your user account straight into that workspace. So you don't have to mess with it again if you're working in there for an extended period of time. So I'm going to go to designs, create a new design. Just one, it's going to be US, create. We'll go in here. I'm just going to select a new flexible pavement. And we see right away, no calibration settings are available for this design. No maintenance strategy is available for this design. It's been turned off in the UI. And we go look in the structure, look at mechanical properties, and we can see the order that I've put these properties in is also the order that I have defined for the workspace. So we have dynamic modulus, then asphalt binder, and then indirect tensile strength. Just while I'm here in dynamic modulus, I'll just show off some of the features that we've added over the past couple weeks. You can now actually put in your dynamic modulus information. This is just input level 3, but it works for levels 1 and 2 as well. And you can run dynamic modulus, and it'll show you the master curve and the shift curve, the viscosity curve for the data that you've entered. I hope this helps people kind of visualize their data a little bit better and understand what they're seeing from their higher level tests. Creep compliance isn't fully implemented yet, but we're getting close. So similar master curve generation graph will be available for creep compliance that'll show your creep compliance data as well. Okay, so that covers everything that I wanted to cover for the editable user interface. So I'm going to head back to presentation. And this is just going to be a review of the items that we just went over. So the talking points were the UI configuration allows you to assign read, write, and visibility flags to all component properties in a design. It allows you to arrange the order of all design component properties in tabs. You can actually set your default and session workspace using the nav menu selected workspaces. component. And remember, before we can start using a workspace and its corresponding UI configuration settings, make sure a user's been associated with the workspace, and same for libraries, which we're going to look at soon. Let me just show that again, because I want to make sure this hits home. If you create a workspace, we're in Sandbox 1 workspace, and you don't have any paired users, they're not going to be able to see the user interface, configuration settings, or the libraries that you have in your system. So you have to hit Add Association and then select the users that you want to be able to work in that workspace. And then the same thing is true for libraries. You have to hit Add Association. Of course, there's no libraries left to add here to this to associate with this workspace. I've already associated these 3, but you do have to perform these steps in order to actually see the libraries and allow your users to be able to utilize the workspace. So don't forget to do that. Okay. So yeah, this is just a reiteration of that. So we reviewed the workspace user interface configuration and how that changed our design editor component configuration, and the order and visibility of the property fields and the structure component. Those are altered according to our specific settings. So a question that's come up is, if I turn off the visibility, let's say for calibration factors, what data actually gets used for those properties that the user can't see? Those are going to use the system default values. Now, remember, you can override the default values in your workspace using design templates or libraries, but the default values are typically going to be the system defaults for those for that workspace, or for if you have a design template, it'll use those as the default values. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about libraries now. How do you use libraries? How do you upload and download them? And what are some future improvements that we're looking at for libraries? So we're going to look at libraries for calibration factors. I think it's calibration factors and traffic as examples for the rest of the design components. We're also going to look at how to create and use a material library. And we're going to look at a design template, which are themselves a type of library. We're also going to review some potential improvements to the library system that we've been looking at. And in order to see the relationship between libraries and workspaces and how to use libraries within a workspace, I've already created the sample ones, but we're going to take a quick look at how to do that and what that means. Okay, so creating a library is very easy. You just go to the default libraries. You go to your tenant. You select the tenant that you want to you select the tenant that you want to work with, and then you click that tenant's default library setting in the action menu. And then there are different modules that you can set up. So you'll create the library, you'll save it, and you get this library saving options dialog. And that's just saying you've gone through the various components of a design. Which of the design components or modules do you want to save as libraries? And so you'll check a few boxes there. And then you have to associate that library with your workspace. Don't forget that, and don't forget to save. And then once you've saved your library module, you may want to share that with people who are in different workspaces, or you might want to share that with somebody else who can then upload it into their workspace. So we do allow you to download the libraries, to share them, and then you can send that to another user, and they can upload it in their workspace. And so we'll review how to do that here in just a minute. And then you can always, if you make a mistake, you can always delete a library using the trash can icon on the components page, and that'll get rid of the library entirely. Okay, so this is going over importing libraries into a design. So you'll navigate to the design editor, you'll navigate to the design component or module that you'd like to import, and then click the ellipsis in the bottom right corner. you'll select the module menu item and you'll select import. It'll be the name of the module and then say library, and then you just select that library to import and it'll update the data in that design. So we'll take a look at that as well in just a minute. Material libraries are unique libraries that correspond to a specific type of material. They can represent any material in the system. Functionally, material libraries are identical to the normal module libraries. They just have a few unique features built in. You can use material libraries straight out of the drag and drop menu when you're working with your designs. And you can also import or export material XML files as libraries as well. So let's take a quick break from the presentation, go over some of this stuff in the UI. So I've gone to my tenant, selected my tenant, and now I go to my default libraries. If I want to create a new one, I just click the Add New button. I select the unit system, and I give it a name. That's going to then create my library, which will become available just below. Below that is a similar process for material libraries. You'll click Add New. You'll note that you'll select the unit system, give it a name, and then you'll select the actual type of material that you're going to be working with. And the material libraries screen is a little bit different than the rest of the components. We'll take a look at that here in just a minute. So let's take a look at these three libraries. Now you can see I've associated a workspace with each one. You can actually go into the library. You can see which workspaces it is associated with. And this one was a traffic library, so I just changed the 2 AADTT for demonstration purposes. I changed that default from 4,000 to 10,000. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's go to Designs, Editor, let's go to Traffic. You can see it's set to 4,000. Since my user account is associated with the workspace and the traffic library is associated with the workspace, I now have access to that library. So I can actually click the Import Traffic Library button and you can see my traffic library shows up right there. So I just click on it and that's going to update all of the traffic information in every tab up here at the top with whatever information I had in that library. So it's a very quick way to set up your traffic data and to be able to pull that into one or more designs while you're doing your analyses. And then this exists for each of the libraries that you set up in the system. So we saw that one for traffic. We have a design template that we're going to look at, and I also set up one for structure. So just looking at the structure one, we can see it's for a new flexible pavement. We go to structure. I think I changed air voids, maybe effective binder content, and the percentage asphalt content by weighted mix. I believe you can come in here and also actually set the layer selection structure here as well, but right now I just have the layer 1 flexible default asphalt concrete. So let's go back to our design and take a look at structure. I think I already imported this one. Let's just make a quick change in the structure library, something that's a little more obvious. Let's just change this to 10 and then save it. Now it's saying, okay, which component did you want to save here? And we're doing a structure library, so I'll just check that box and hit save. And then we'll go back to our design, and I should be able to import that. So we go to structure, import structure library. It's not available for this module. What did I forget to do? Sandbox 1, edit libraries, structure 1. Oh, I wanted to note here, you can set these libraries as the default library. If I'm not mistaken, I need to clarify this with Yanbin or Brendan, the dev team. I think if you set it as default, when you create a new design in this workspace, it'll use this structure as the default. So I'm not sure why that one didn't show up. we'll come back to that here in a minute. Okay, so yeah, so we looked at traffic, we looked at structure. Let's take a look now at the material library. So I've created a material library called Asphalt Mix 1, and we went through the Add New, and that's just going to have it show up here in this grid. And when we click on Asphalt Mix 1, we can see that I have the workspace associated, Sandbox 1, and we can see I've changed the air void. This is the one where I changed it. The air void percentage and I think percent asphalt content by weight of mix for the two that I changed. But I definitely changed the air voids on this one. So let's go back to our design and go to structure. And we'll go to the layer editor. And under flexible, we can see I just have access to my my material library right here. And it's really easy to put in. You just drag and drop and just delete the other asphalt layer. And that is basically how the material libraries work. You can actually search for your material library here. So if you have, naming convention or something like that, and that will filter this list down to, whatever you're typing into the filter box at the top, including your accessible material libraries. Okay, so the other thing that we talked about in the presentation was being able to export and import these components, these component libraries into the system. So that's actually really easy to do. You just click on the library that you want to export. Where am I? I'm a little lost here. Traffic. So we're in traffic. We're in the traffic lib1 library, and we go to the ellipsis, traffic, and then download traffic XML. I do want to keep that file. So that's created this traffic lib1 XML file on my machine. And now if I'm, I can send that file to someone, and then when they're working in their design and they want to try out the library that I generated, they'll go to their traffic node, they'll click the ellipsis, traffic, import traffic library, traffic, upload traffic XML, and we'll double click it, and you can see that uploaded the traffic XML data into this design. So it's just a way to be able to share library data across tenants that's currently not built into the system. We looked at doing that for the version 3 release, and it's a pretty complicated process a complicated feature to put in place. So we thought that this file transfer feature would be more useful out of the box right away. As we get further into the development of version 3, we can look at adding built-in features that allow you to share your data across tenants with other agencies. If that's something that users are interested in doing, that's something that we can integrate more into the system like we did with the climate data. Right. Back to the presentation. So we looked at material libraries, looked at working with those. Just want to make sure we covered all of the topics here. We looked at importing and exporting libraries. The next thing we want to look at are design templates. So those are, before we were looking at specific components of the design, traffic, performance criteria, calibration factors, the structure. Design templates are taking an entire design as is and being able to basically create a new design using all of that information. So we'll just take a quick look at that as well. So I should have one already set up in my default libraries. Yep, this one's marked as design template. So just take a look at that real quick. So this is something where you'd go through, you have a particular type of design that you're going to be doing over and over and over again with the same information. Maybe you're just changing some of the mix information, or maybe you're just changing thicknesses of the asphalt, for example. And so you just want to be able to reutilize the information that you had quickly in the system and just change a couple of the properties. So that's a good candidate for a design template. And so you'd come through into the design template library, you'd set up the information that you need, and then you'd hit save. And then you just check the design template box and hit save, and then it's basically ready to go. And when you go to your designs page now and you create a new design, test 3, it's actually going to show up because this workspace, my user account's associated with the workspace, the Sandbox 1 library is associated with my workspace, and the Sandbox 1 library has this design template in it called New Flexible 1. So you just select it and you hit create, and all of the data that was in that design, including things like structure, are just there and ready to go. And so that's nice to be able to quickly work with copies of design that you need to make, small changes to. If you're doing iterative runs of a particular design, this is a good way to set those up. So that's the design template feature. Okay, with that, we're going to jump into user management policies and your agency subscription. We'll look at adding users to your tenant, managing user policies, and viewing your account information, subscription information. In the last webinar, we reviewed how to add users to the tenant. I'm going to cover that again just because we've gotten some questions on it. And I also want to discuss how to modify policies that govern what your users can see and do in the system related to tenants, workspaces, and libraries. We're also going to take a look at how to view your user account information, what it can tell you about your current subscription status. So we'll do that real quick and then come back to the slides. Okay, so first of all, how do I access my user account? It's not through the nav menu over here. It's this little person icon over here. So you click on that and you click manage. And that's going to show you your user account information. So I've got my email address here, what my default tenant is set to, what current session tenant I'm set as, and it's got my associated tenants, so I can actually see what those are. If I have more than one, they'll show up here in the list. And then information about my subscription. So if I have more than one subscription, some educational institutions will have an educational license. They'll also have an enterprise license. They'll use the enterprise license for research, and so user account, they'll assign their research user accounts to that subscription, and they will assign their educational accounts to the educational subscription. And that guarantees that those educational users can't be soaking up the paid enterprise subscription slots. So it'll show you some information about the subscription, how many seats you have, how many are currently occupied, and when the subscription is going to expire. And then the last thing you can do on the user account management page is you can update your password. So you should change your password about, once every 3 months or so. It'd be a good idea to update your password. So you just come in, you type in your old password, you put in a new password, and you confirm it and hit update. You'll get a confirmation email sent to your account, and then you click that, and your password will be updated in the system. All right, let's go back and take a look at user account policies in the tenant. So inside the tenant, your tenant, you have your users. And if you would like to invite a user to your tenant, you can certainly do that. All you need is their email address, and then you'll select one or more subscriptions that you want their account to be associated with. If you select more than one subscription, the system is going to log the user in. Then that user will need to go up here to manage their account, and they'll need to select which subscription they would like to use. That's pretty uncommon, but I just want you to be aware that that's the process for that. Once your account is set to a subscription, it will use that subscription by default until you come back to your user account management page and change it. Okay, so that's add new users. It shows the status for any users, whether or not they're online or offline. If you want an account to no longer have access, you can just disable the account here. You don't have to delete it. That's if maybe if somebody is going away on vacation and you don't want them to be, for any reason, if you don't want an account to be logged in, you can always just disable the account rather than delete it. And then, of course, you can always remove the account from the tenant. They also won't have access then. So let's look at groups, policies, and subscriptions. So we'll click Edit. So right now, we're editing policies for my account. There are 5 different policies. There's edit permission for subscriptions, libraries, groups, workspaces, and users. If we just briefly going through each one of these, edit permission for subscription allows you to access the subscriptions page and to alter subscription. I don't think there's really anything you can do there right now, but in the future, if you wanted to be able to alter subscription status, say you wanted to upgrade your seats, we'd like to be able to link that somehow with ASHO to be able to allow users to change that through the system. So that's some future work that we're going to be looking at on the subscriptions page. Let me go back to users and policies here. The ones that are pertinent to this webinar are really libraries and workspaces. This is what's going to allow your users to get in and manage a tenant. So if you want a user account to be able to set up libraries and set up workspaces, they either have to be the root admin or they have to have edit permission for libraries and workspaces. And just a brief mention on what the root admin is. Every agency's designated end user when they purchase the subscription, that person was sent a registration email from our system that letting them know that they needed to register as the root admin for their agency. The definition of the root admin means that they, by default, have access to all of these policies. So they have all of these policies applied. Your tenant always has to have at least one root admin. The system actually won't let you not have a root admin. Now you can make more than one root admin, that's fine. And that's just defined by who has access to all of these policies in the system. And I think that's it for policies and root admin. The only other mention here is users and groups, and they're pretty self-explanatory. That this allows you to edit groups, create and manage them, and this allows you to invite users to the system. So that's what these policies do. You can also create groups. I haven't created any yet, so they're not going to show up here. But you can add them to the tenant. So we'll just go to edit groups and policy, or excuse me, edit, sorry, we need to go to group policies and then add one. So this will just be test group 1, create, and this group is active. We can go into the group and we can add associations for the group. So what policies are going to be available for this group? These policies will be applied for every user that's in the group. So if we wanted to assign them libraries and workspaces, now this test group 1 has library and workspace edit permission. And then, you can go to your group policies and subscriptions on your user account, and you can actually associate the group with your user. So now I'm a part of, this user account is a part of test group 1. And any policies that are part of test group 1 are applied to my account as well. You can remove it with the trash can. Same thing for these policies. So that's how to add new users, how to work with the policies, what the policies mean, how to create groups, and how to view your subscription information, how to view user account information, all of that information. So just as a review, your user account, that's got your email, your subscription status, associated tenants. You can change your password. You can add and remove users to and from the tenant. You can view the status, the online, offline status of users. You can disable user accounts, and you can manage user and group policies. And then a set of policies define the accessibility of the user account or group within the PMED system. So you can edit the policies that the selected user or group has permission to use. And then we went over what the different permissions were for the various policies. And finally, we talked about the root administrators in the system and how they always have full access to all policies, and that it is not possible to remove the root administrator from the system. That each account will have at least one. Okay, so in review, we're going to look at the takeaways from these, from our discussions and from the demonstrations. Tenants are a group of users who share common access with specific privileges or policies to the software instance. Tenants are usually one-to-one with an agency, but in some cases, agencies may have multiple tenants. Workspaces represent the data and user interface configuration defined for a specific use case in your tenant and are used to organize your tenant users and libraries. The workspace-based design UI customization feature in the app allows you to customize and simplify the design editor work process. Any user with the workspace editor policy assigned can manage workspaces and their customizable user interfaces. Workspaces themselves are associated with libraries and user accounts. And workspaces, libraries, and users form a working set which can be used to customize design workflow processes and data. Libraries are used to group and manage data sets at your agency, usually for a specific use case. Libraries are comprised of design components or modules and can be thought of as pieces of a design. Libraries can be associated with one or more workspaces, and only users associated with those workspaces can use those libraries. And creating a set of libraries for your designers is going to simplify the design process for them. Libraries are used to load default data into designs in the design editor user interface. Root administrators and other user accounts with the edit users policy granted can invite and manage users in the system, and it is the agency's responsibility. This is the important part about users. It's the agency's responsibility to manage their user accounts in the system. Okay. That wraps up takeaways. So we're going to look at poll questions 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to just change this to 2 minutes for this poll. Okay. And I'm opening the poll now. Okay, about 10 seconds left. All right, thanks everybody for your answers. Okay, so with that, we're gonna move to the question and answer session. So I'm gonna start by going through the Q&A tab. I've got an updated answer about the setting workspace default data. And then if you do have any other questions, please post them in the Q&A box, and we'll go through those. The first question's about the integration of climate data. Oh, it's not a question, it's a statement. We're happy about, one user is very happy about the integration of the climate data with the MERIT 2 climatic data set. We appreciate that. That was a long time coming. Sorry it took so long, but we're glad to have that done, and hopefully that's very useful for all the users. The next question is, does PMED v3 allow users to change calibration factors manually? And Brendan went ahead and answered that question. The answer is yes. You can manually change the calibration factors. You could save those as a library and then set those calibration factors as a default for your user's workspace. And whenever a user creates a new design, they will get those calibration factors as their defaults. And then you can also adjust them on the fly. Voter mentioned this. You can adjust them on the fly on a per design basis if you'd like to do that as well. The next question was, can we enter the calibration factors from a centralized office so the individual users do not need to enter that for individual projects anymore? Yes. As I mentioned previously, you could set them up as a library in a workspace, assign your users to that workspace, make sure the library is associated with that workspace. And then whenever a user signs in, they'll automatically have that workspace as their default. And they will automatically get the calibration data that you've provided for them defaulted into any design that they create. And then Voter expounded on that answer a little bit more as well. The next question is, if a tenant forgets to log out, can the admin log them out without removing them? The answer is yes. You can go into the user menu and click the active button to set them to inactive, and that will log out or vacate their subscription seat. The next question is, can we have more than one group admin in case admin is away? The answer to that is yes. You can have as many administrators as you would like, but you have to have at least one. The next question is, what is the limit of maximum number of users and how many users can work concurrently? Is the seat associated with the account? The answer is, Brendan had the answer here. The number of subscriptions the tenant has will decide the number of seats. You can have a number of concurrent users equal to those seats. I don't think we have a limit on the number of registered users. So you can invite as many people to your tenant as you would like, but their access to the system is restricted by the number of seats that your subscription has concurrently. We had a question that someone couldn't see an active button in the user menu. We'll need to follow up with this person individually to see why that would be. I don't think it's in the user menu. The active button that Brendan was referring to, if I'm not mistaken, was,
I just the access button.
The access button, right? Yeah, so if you flip this to no, that vacates the seat. Thank you, Brendan. And then you can just turn it back on again. Next question is there any user manual on this web-based V3 that we can share? It's a great question. The user's manual has been uploaded. We've been transitioning the user manual over to Bookdown. So we're in the process of updating all the screenshots in that, so it's not finished yet. But the verbiage is also there, all the technical information's there. We just need to update the screenshots in the system. So unfortunately, I can't share that yet, but we are working on that right now. It's slated for this sprint and next sprint, which is going to push us out to mid-September is probably when that'll be available in the system. And we're actually doing a similar process for the manual of practice. And the reason we're doing that is working with the PDF and integrating with the PDF. Since PDF is a proprietary format, it's very difficult to work with. If we move everything over to an open format like Bookdown or Markdown, that makes it a lot easier to integrate into the application, so that way you can get the exact specific help that you need on any particular property or topic in the system. Next question is, does the current CAT tool, the calibration assistance tool, can it be used to perform local calibration for ME version 3? Not yet. We're working on that as well. Again, that's going to be mid-September, late September when that will be available. And you'll then be able to use the CAT for V3 calibration.
And Chad, we have a webinar coming up next month that goes through that as well.
Yes, that's coming up on my next slide, so I'll just go ahead and show that now.
One other item to mention about the climate integration is that Mara is available globally. So if you go to a different location, say in Europe.
Oh yeah, I can show that.
You'll be able to integrate those values as well, or those climate sets.
Yeah, thanks, Voter. That is very important. So if I don't know if we're working in, what's a good one? Let's go to Sweden. Take me to Sweden. Okay, and we'll click on the map. I need to select a data set. There we go. So I'll let that churn for a second. We'll come back to it. So yeah, they're the climate stations for this area in Sweden. And as Boder mentioned, this is available globally. So retrieve that. The next question is there any limit on the number of admins? Answered that previously. No, there is not. And Brendan also answered. Next question, is it possible to grant a user access that is outside of an agency? Definitely. Just be aware that when you grant somebody access to the system, if they log in, they're going to use one of your seats, one of your subscription seats. But you can grant access to any person that you would like to use your tenant that has a valid email address. So yes, that is possible. Okay, yeah, and Eve, we'll follow up with you on that. If that is causing an issue, we'll try to get that resolved in the next sprint. That's all I had for Q&A. It looks like we just got one more question. Does any server connectivity issue adversely affect performing the design? It shouldn't. This system's been written with a technology called server-side Blazor, and so the whole system runs on the server. So I'm not sure what you mean by connectivity issue, but as long as you're able to access the web application, there shouldn't be any issues with performing the design or with running the design. Now, occasionally the server may be under load. So right now the server can run up to 5 designs simultaneously. As I mentioned in the previous webinar, we've implemented what's called a fair queue system. So if you were to queue up 5 designs and then 1 second later, I queued up a design, it's going to run your first design first, and then it's going to run my design second, and then the rest of your designs. And if there's, and that's if they're in the queue. If the server's not under load, it would just run well, yeah, there would be a queue in that case. So if there were, if you had 4 designs that you're running, and I queued up a design, whichever design it was currently on in your set of 4, actually, sorry, in that case where there were 4 designs running, if I queued up a 5th design, it would immediately start running it. If I then queued up another design, it would be a 6th or 7th design, those would go into the queue. And the way the fair queue works is it's just going to select the next tenant and user in the line and thread them in. So everything is threaded together. And that way nobody can stop up the server with a bunch of design runs. We had a question about the number of seats. Since there may be a limited number of seats, is it possible to rank the seat users so that a user may be bumped? It is not currently possible to do that. If that's something that agencies are interested in, that's a feature we can look at adding to the system. But no, that is not currently possible. And Jay, I encourage you to send that question in to pavementmedesign@area.com, and we can get that looked at. Next question, is there any limit on the number of tenants, or is it based on the number of license subscriptions? I'm not sure I fully understand that question. When you make a purchase through ASHA, we set up a customer account in our system. That customer account can have any number of tenants associated with it. And then your user accounts are actually the things that get associated with subscriptions. The tenants do as well through the user account, basically. So yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand that question, but I hope I answered it. A quick question that just came through. Can we go over how to give policy access to other users again? Absolutely. So go to tenant. We'll go to tenants, select your tenant, go to your users. This is the list of users here. Go to groups, policies, and subscriptions and hit edit. And for this user, this is where you can add and remove the different types of policies. Add new, it's not going to show anything, there aren't any policies to add or remove. And then, delete a specific policy. Okay, if you do have more questions while we wrap up, please put those in the Q&A box. We still have plenty of time scheduled for the webinar, so I'll hang around for a bit. I can answer more questions in the Q&A box as they come up. Don't feel like I'm rushing you out. I do want to make a quick mention about tenant information. This just shows your tenant information for your agency for the selected tenant. And then we'll head back to presentation. So just some quick announcements. As Voter mentioned, we do have another webinar coming up. That's going to go over, that's on September 13th, this this next month. That's going to go over the integration of the NCHRP 151 in version 3, as well as the recalibration of the rigid pavement models. September 13th, mark your calendars. And we'll send out invites for that. I think we may have already done that. I'll have to check with Heidi. But but if we have not sent out invitations for it, they will be coming out very soon.
It'll go out this week.
This week. Thank you, voter. And with that, I think, yeah, I'll hand it back over to Clark to take us out.
Okay, thanks, Chad. And I would like to thank Chad for a very informative webinar. Well done, Chad. And thanks also to the ARA staff who are managing the Q&A box. I appreciate that. And thanks also to our attendees for your attention. That's greatly appreciated as well. I'd like to end with some contact information. First on the list is Ryan Fragapane, who is our AASHTOWare project manager, and you can see his email address and phone number there. Again, I'm Clark Morrison with NCDOT, the chair of the Pavement ME Design Task Force, and my email is on the screen. Also, just below that is the ME Design Resource website, www.me-design.com. If you're looking for information on Pavement ME Design, this is probably should be your first stop. Also, we have the Pavement ME Design Users Group. The contact for that is Jennifer Albert with Federal Highway Administration, and you see her email address there. Customer service is handled through the Pavement ME Design Help Desk. You can send an email to pavementmedesign@ara.com, or there's also a phone number where you can call to get help. The ARA staff working on the project are Chad Becker, Wouter Brink, and Harold Von Quintus, and you see their email addresses, and they can also be reached through that help desk phone number as well, 217-356-4500. And with that, unless there's any more questions, I think we're done. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Clark.